All right, now that we're through the first few rounds of the NFL draft, I'm going to do a quick mock draft, just first round, with a couple honorable mentions that may be early second round, late first round as well, depending on what happens. This is an update from my previous, based on some landing spots from some of these guys. I'm going to keep it standard here and do this based on a 12-man Superflex tight end premium, because most of my leagues are tight end premium leagues. So I'm going to start from 101. Normally I would start the other way around, but I think the first one or two are very obvious. So still at 101, Jeremiah Love. I know the situation wasn't the one that a lot of people were hoping he would land in, but I still think he's an elite talent. He's going to be the best running back coming out of this group and could be that sort of Gibbs, Bijan. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. I think we know 102, Mendoza. I've been less big on Mendoza overall as a player, but I think what the Raiders have done there and where he's landed, I think actually puts him in a pretty good spot, and he could be a very strong talent. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. So 101 and 102, I think, were pretty obvious. But I'll jump into 103 and continue on. This is where it starts to get really interesting. 103 does not change from my original prediction, because I love the landing spot even more than where I thought he could land was Malachi Lemon at receiver and landing at the Eagles. Eagles are obviously going to be trading A.J. Brown. That means Lemon and Smith will be the two, receiver one, receiver two, week to week. And I think Lemon's going to get a lot of targets, a lot of looks. And I'll touch on somebody else they drafted shortly, but that was a big draft, I think, for the Eagles yesterday, at first and second round, adding some real quality playmakers, and I do think still Lemon is the top receiver of this draft class. 104, Tyson. And his landing spot going to the Saints was a good one. I think I'm not as big on Shaw as some people, but he obviously had a decent season. And Tyson is very much so right there with Lemon as one of the top receivers in this class. I do think on the other side of Olave will take some pressure off him coming in as a rookie. He's going to get plenty of looks because after Tyson Olave, there's a huge drop off in quality, and there's not even really a tight end to speak of outside of Johnson, who is getting up in age and really has had one or two decent seasons. So I think he's going to get a lot of looks. I think with Etienne there, they'll be able to spread the ball a little bit and keep defenses guessing. So good spot. Hopefully he can stay healthy. That's the biggest key. But at 104, he is a must in my opinion. 105. As much as I'm not a huge fan of the receiver, Carnell Tate, going to the Titans also was not my pick. Had he landed at the Eagles, I probably would have moved him up to maybe where Lemon was, but landing in, and I spoke about this last night, landing in Tennessee with Ridley there, Robinson there, as well as Ayo and DK from last year. No offensive line support in that first round or two for Ward, which was a real struggle last year for the Titans. I think he's going to have a tough sled and a lot of competition around him for targets. I'm again a bit disappointed by that pick last night, or in the first round, and not as high on the overall talent from Tate as well. So that's gonna make it a little bit more challenging. 106. This is a big surprise, but it is going to be the running back the Seattle Seahawks drafted at 132 in price. I would not have had him here in any of my initial mock drafts because I didn't think he was going to go that high and go into a situation where it's starting to look a little bit starting to look more and more advantageous for him. I said last night, there is a chance in reality that he could have a better first year than Love, which would be quite a big statement to make, I know, but he's definitely going to get some early looks, and if he gets early momentum going, that backfield is not stacked, and it looks like Charbonnet may or may not be back early on, so he'll have a chance to prove himself fairly quickly, which I think is great for him. And honestly, that Seattle team overall is a really strong team offensively, strong line, so he's going to have a lot of opportunity as well. So I like Price. I moved up very, very high into my draft boards, and running back being one of the top, if not the top position to make sure you recruit young at. I'm going to go with Price at 106. 107 is going to be maybe a bit of a shocker here to some. I think my initial mock draft, I had a quarterback here, but I'm going to go Omar Cooper. I liked Cooper from the outset. I don't love the landing spot because I'm not a huge fan of the Jets, but I've calmed down a little bit on the Jets draft, and I like Cooper in this spot because I do think Wilson's going to get a lot of attention, and I do think he's going to break out even more so this year. But Gino is a guy that tends to like to spread the ball around. He doesn't like, focus in on one target too much to kind of spread the wealth. I don't know, exactly how or why he does that, but I think Omar Cooper could be a really big beneficiary of that and could be, looking at numbers that might even be better than Tate, depending on how everything shakes out. Wilson's also had durability issues over the last few years here and there, so I think he easily steps into receiver 2 and gets plenty of targets. Next up at 108, I've got Sadiq. Same team going to the Jets at tight end. Hated the pick. Not so much because of the player. I think the player is overly talented and a really, really strong, going to be a very strong tight end, very athletic. Saw at the combine how amazing he was. So I think he's a great player. I just didn't like the pick for them, given they have Mason Taylor on there. Reeks of Michael Mayer vibes. So I feel like Taylor's going to take a tight end 2 set now and take a step behind Sadiq. Sadiq can be that sort of receiving tight end and be that Bowers, if you will, not as good as Bowers, but for the Raiders, as he would be for the Jets. So again, I didn't love the draft choice and the pick just because of what they had, but I do like the player, and I think in a tight end premium league at 108, he's going to be a very, very strong pick. He may even go a little sooner before Price and Cooper there, and maybe after that group of receivers at 6. So, but I do like Sadiq there right now at 8. Number 9 is a big fan of Eli Stowers, and I think Stowers going to Philadelphia as well, I think is an awesome spot for him. I don't know if his production this year will be as high as a player you draft at this spot at 109 you would want, but I will also say I do think Goddard has probably got one real solid year left in him, which means Stowers should take over next year and still have a decent rookie season as well. I think Sadiq and Stowers have very similar traits and athleticism. I would have them at 1 and 2 or 1A and 1B. So for the Eagles to grab him as well as obviously Lemon, I think they really stockpiled their offense this draft and really 2 talented players. So I've got Stowers at 109. 110, who dropped a bit from my initial pick, but I actually do love the landing spot, and I kind of touched on it last night. Maybe I got a little excited in my first mock draft, but Carson Beck going to Arizona. They pick up Jeremiah Love early on, and while I didn't love it for them as a team, love it because of the player. They've got MHJ, Michael Wilson as well, and I do think Carson Beck could actually get a chance to play, and overall, I've said before about Carson Beck, is he the best quarterback that we've seen or anything, or is he Mendoza level? Potentially not, but he is a winner, and he does know how to win games, and I think that counts for a lot. And with a team like that has MHJ, Jeremiah Love, Michael Wilson, McBride, all you got to do is try and find one of those open receivers or one of those guys to catch the ball. And it shouldn't be that difficult, to be quite honest with you, just given the talent level that would be around him. So I do hope Carson Beck gets a chance to play. I think if he does, it'll probably be around mid-season. But he's one that I'm definitely would have in the back into the first round. Next up, I've got, I'm going to try and keep this to 10 minutes, so I've got 1 minute or so left, so I'll be very quick on these last ones. 111, I've got Antonio Williams, who's a bit of a shocker and wasn't on a lot of my lists early on, but I love the landing spot. Slot receiver going to the Commanders. They need a slot receiver to complement McLaurin outside, and I thought they would have, at least by this point, grabbed one of those running backs out there as well, which maybe is a positive sign for JCM. I'm not sure, but I think Antonio Williams coming in is a good sign. He's a very strong slot receiver, and I think he could be a game changer for Daniels and give him another option, and where options are lacking. So I really like the potential out of Antonio Williams. He wasn't as highly rated, I think, but those are the players that sometimes come out the best. 112, KC Concepcion. I had him early on in my other drafts, in my other mocks, and I was actually had him moving up. And the only reason he's fallen, I guess, to 112 is the landing spot. I don't love the landing spot for him, not just because it's the Browns, but also because they took another receiver shortly thereafter. They've got Fannin as well and Judkins, so they've got a good group. I just am not sure. Again, I mentioned last night the concern is around quarterback and who's passing the ball. And Casey Concepcion, I think, has a lot of skill. He has some drops, I know, in the past, but has definitely grown on me over this initial process. But I just think it's going to be really difficult for him to make a big impact on that team with that quarterback and with all the other weapons around. So I will take him at 112, but I'd almost consider a few of these other guys before him. And I'm going to go through, these are my honorable mentions, and kind of go from there. So Denzel Boston was also one of my honorable mentions. Casey Concepcion or Boston, it's kind of a toss-up. Who do you take? I'm not exactly, wasn't 100% sure. And then I've got others, especially in a TEP league, a tiny premium league. Eli Raridon, who drafted by the Patriots. I do think this year he's probably not going to get as many looks, but we drafted him high. I love Notre Dame tight ends. Historically, they've always done really well, and I think it gives us our young tight end we've potentially been looking for over the last few years. So I really liked us moving up and grabbing him, and it gives May another young weapon for the future. Again, this season, probably not going to be one of those standout tight ends, but I think once Henry's this could be potentially his last season with the Patriots, he will be able to step up. So Raridon is an honorable mention. And then two other honorable mentions that I would definitely think about potentially in the early second round. Drew Aller, yes, Rodgers may or may not be coming back, and Drew Aller may or may not be good. I'm not going to... he doesn't have the talent level that you kind of see that you expect is going to be a game changer in the NFL. But I mean, he is a fighter. He's a battler. I've seen him, some of the games and that he's played in last year at Penn, and some of the throws that he's made. And I think even Kuiper was saying last night, he can be an elite passer. It's just inconsistent. And maybe a good coach can help him do that. But he's also got weapons around him as well, which is really exciting, as well as for receiver weapons potentially in the future if Rodgers does come back and this is his last year. And then one more who I kind of liked and I loved the landing spot is Zachary Branch, landing in Atlanta, from Georgia, so not going far. But he could easily step in the receiver 2 role immediately there. I think he's a good receiver, and quite very highly underrated. I was hoping the Patriots might take him later on, but he went a little earlier than probably we would have moved up to get him or anything like that anyways. But I think he's a strong receiver. He's a battler, and I think he can do a lot of damage when you've got London out there controlling a lot of the attention as well. So Zachary Branch, I think, will be an early second rounder for me if I can get him. He may even go a little bit higher depending on how things start to shake out. There's been a lot of talk about Pitts. It looks like Pitts will be there as well. So those are my 1 to 12 of the first round. Again, 12-man Superflex tight end premium league, as well as a couple of honorable mentions as well.